So former President Jacob Zuma's medical records taking center stage at the start of pre-trial hearings in his corruption case sitting at the High Court in Pietermaritzburg yesterday. Senior State Prosecutor Billy Downer deposed an affidavit filed with the court last week in which doctors appointed by the NPA found that Zuma is fit to stand trial. But Zuma's legal team has called out the state for wanting to, quote, re-examine him, saying it undermines the authority of his military medical team. Zuma's lawyers also arguing that Downer lacks the title to prosecute, accusing him of turning the criminal case against the former president into some kind of legacy project. Let's unpack all of this for you now, bring in criminal law expert Ulrich Roux, who joins us now via our telephone line. And Ulrich, it's great to have you. Thanks so much for speaking to us on the AM report. I want to start by perhaps unpacking some of the terms that we use interchangeably, and I wonder if correctly so. On one hand, there are terms such as the Zuma's lawyers are trying to have Billy Downer recused from the case, whilst there's also talk around having to remove his title to prosecute. The outcome might be the same, but are those two things technically the same?
Well, thank you for having me, firstly. So he can only be recused or have himself recused if it is proven that he's not acting in an objective and unbiased manner. The only grounds upon which the judge can find that he should not be prosecuting the matter is if the defense team can show that he is persecuting the accused, Mr. Zuma. So what that means is that the NPA and the National Prosecuting Authority Act states clearly that the NPA should prosecute a person based on the evidence available to them and not persecute a person at all costs. So in other words, if there's allegations made against a person and there's no reasonable foreseeability of a successful outcome, then the NPA should not prosecute that person. Whereas if there's evidence against a person and objectively looking at the evidence and presenting the evidence, there is a reasonable foreseeability of a successful outcome, then they are well within their rights to prosecute that person. So what the defense is essentially doing now is they're saying that Billy Downer has lost all objectivity. He's not looking at the evidence objectively. He's simply trying to find or convict Mr. Zuma at all costs. So in other words, he will not objectively present the evidence. He will present it in such a way that will persecute him, and he will go to all lengths possible to try and convict him. Having said that, it is Billy Downer is a very seasoned and very experienced prosecutor. He's been the head of the Commercial Crimes Unit in the Western Cape for many years. He's dealt with many high-profile cases, and of course, he's also the prosecutor who successfully prosecuted Shabir Sheikh, who was convicted of fraud and corruption and sentenced to 15 years imprisonment in 2005-06. So if one looks at that objectively, of course he is the prosecutor who has the most knowledge about this matter, because the evidence presented in the Shabir Sheikh matter is very similar to the evidence that will be presented in the Jacob Zuma matter. In my opinion, I think this is just another attempt from Jacob Zuma and his legal team to frustrate the proceedings and to prolong it, and to yet again try and cast some sort of shadow over the fact that Jacob Zuma is being prosecuted. But we'll have to wait and see what the judge makes of this application now again.
The special plea does raise what I consider to be an incredibly interesting discussion around the disposition of a prosecutor in any case. I've seen some commentary where people were asking the question, well, what's wrong with the prosecutor throwing all they have in a case, especially if, for instance, they're trying to win? You're saying their responsibility actually extends beyond that. It shouldn't be about winning, but essentially about the truth.
No, exactly. No, it can never only be about winning a case for the prosecution. The prosecution must present evidence in an objective manner, and if that evidence succeeds in proving a person's guilt beyond a reasonable doubt, then that has been done successfully. But they should not at all costs try and convict a person. They should look at the evidence objectively. But I mean, to take it one step further, it is it's once again one of these applications where Jacob Zuma has from the outset said that he wanted his day in court in this matter. He wanted to prove his innocence. He wanted the state to charge him so that he can show to the entire South Africa that he didn't do anything wrong. And now, many years later, and after numerous appearances and numerous applications, he is just doing his utmost to avoid that and to avoid this trial from starting. So I think this is the fourth or fifth time that the matter has been set down for trial, and yet again it looks as if the start of this trial is going to be delayed once again. If the possible outcomes in this matter is if they successfully prove that Billy Downer should recuse himself, that he is not acting in an objective manner, and that he's not prosecuting Jacob Zuma fairly, then the matter should be handed over to a new prosecutor, and that will obviously have substantial delays for the new prosecuting team to become acquainted with all of the evidence and the case docket in the matter. Whereas if the application is not successful, so in other words, it is dismissed and the judge finds that there's no grounds to show that Billy Downer should recuse himself, then most likely it will be set down for trial once again. Whether it will be this year or not, one would have to wait and see. And I think that the entire South Africa shouldn't be surprised if the matter is set down for trial again, that there's some other new application in an attempt for the trial not to start.
Yeah, my understanding, Ulrich, very quickly, is that Zuma's lawyers are actually taking it a step further. They're not only taking exception to Billy Downer's conduct and whether or not he should be stripped of his title to prosecute. Yesterday, Dalimpofu also saying that, in fact, because the NPA has been the site of such an extensive state of political meddling, even the prosecution's counsel, i.e. Wim Trengove, and I think it's Andrew Breitenbach, they too shouldn't necessarily be in a position where they're able to prosecute the former president. I mean, those lengths, to what extent do you think that will hold?
Well, the National Prosecuting Authority Act is very clear that any advocate or attorney in private practice can be appointed by the NPA to prosecute a matter, and this is exactly what this is. I mean, it's just I think it is a completely baseless and vexatious attack on Wim Trengove, who is one of the most senior advocates in our country and a very well-respected advocate. And yet again, it is just Jacob Zuma trying to cast a shadow over everyone who's involved in this matter and who dares to say something against him. And this is, I think, in my opinion, just another example of that. But if one looks at what transpired in court yesterday, it was exactly that. It was personal attacks. The Zuma's legal team saying that Billy Downer acted in a criminal manner in requesting to cross-examine the medical team who examined Jacob Zuma. I mean, it borders on being bizarre, because there was a court order which stated that Jacob Zuma must be examined and that medical report must be presented to court. Now, it is trite law in South Africa, and it is common cause that any evidence which is handed up to a court should be scrutinized or can be scrutinized, and cross-examination can take place. So I'm not sure as to what the basis is for that allegation now once again being leveled against the prosecution. I mean, they are entitled to cross-examine any doctor on the doctor's findings. So to me it is, even though Jacob Zuma has a constitutional right to a fair trial, I think that they are just pushing the envelope at every opportunity that they can.
Ulrich Roux, always great getting your take on these issues. Really do appreciate your time. Ulrich is a criminal law expert. Thanks once again.